Shalom. All praises to the Most High, the Most Highest. All praise to His holy name. Shalom to everyone who's listening and who will listen. This is part 3 of the New World Order. Thy will be done. Give you a disclosure. The topics that I talk about are from the Word of God, from other sources that can be looked into to support the Word of God. I talk about subjects that are interesting to me, that I share with you. And it is my intent to speak truthfully about every topic, every word, every thought, and I reserve the right to share my thoughts. But more importantly, I reserve my right to share the Almighty's thoughts. I often share topics that could be offensive, not intentionally, but the truth is offensive to people, especially to people who don't want to hear the truth. When you've been established, and to a people that's been established on lies that favor them. So I ask you to be intelligent, to realize that every book that I share, including the Holy Scriptures, regardless of what book they come out of, meaning the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the sealed portion, the sealed books, and the reason we find what we find out is there came from the Most High is because we can precept it. So I'm going to start off once again from the book, The One World Tartarian, the greatest civilization ever to be erased from history by James W. Lee. And as usual, just as James W. Lee suggested that you do in the book, is to study to show yourself approved. That's basically what he was saying, although he didn't use those words. The scripture tells us to study to show ourselves approved by God. So, and, use many sources to come to a conclusion of truth. Because the Word of God is the truth. So if you have other sources that point towards what God is saying, now you know you have the truth. I told you once before that I was going to share this book. But I've been hesitant to share it because I said, man, that might be too offensive. To say that a whole race is a race of demons. But sometimes you just got to address certain topics. And I've glanced through it, but I can honestly tell you I never read it. So what I want to, if anybody's listening or can hear me, I would like to know if you're interested in me reading this book to you as I read it. Or you want me to just keep it to myself? If anybody, and it may offend some people. It may offend some people. I don't know. Because I've never read it. I'm just talking about the title itself. So if there's anybody who want me to share this book with you and read it to you, let me know in the comment section. If you're not, I'll keep it to myself. Because I know you probably are offended. All right, so let's get to the. I would suggest go back to 1, 2, and 3 of this teaching to catch yourself up. But I will start it off where the author lets us know what is fake history, so you can have a thought pattern going into the reading if this is your first time hearing it. Page 1, the One World Tartarians, probably a third part of the page. It says, the fake history has been called the ancient architectures as Moorish revival or Morisque in Islamic. I've done some research, and no, I'm not trying to offend anyone. That's why I tell you to study, show yourself approved. Do your own research to see if what I'm saying is true. I may be mistaken, but I have done some research where it says all of the religions of the world as we know them. I'm not talking about Christ's people, Israel, the nation of covenant. I'm talking about the religions of the world, and Islam being one of them. And all of their mother is the Catholic Church, from which all of them sprang forth. And then a little bit of history. The Prophet Muhammad got the one God concept from Israelites when he used to hang with them. And then, as it was told, when he wanted to branch off and do his own thing and create the religion of Islam, he took the one God concept with him, and then he persecuted the Israelites because they didn't want to join him. So he changed a few things. Do your own search, see if that's true or not. Like I said, I'm not here to put people down. I'm just trying to tell the correct information. Because even in the Quran, it states that the Israelites are the people of God. The people of the promise. Like I said, I'm not going to get hung up and get angry and all those things if you don't listen or you turn off. Well, that's your prerogative. That's your right. I'm just giving you a review of the things that I've read. But even this author of this book says the fake history has been called the ancient architectures as Moorish revival or Morisque and Islamic. He said, oh, this is fake history. And also colonial, fake history, medieval, fake history, neoclassical, fake history, Baroque, fake history, Romanesque, fake history, Gothic, fake history, Beaux Arts, fake history, elected, fake history, Tudor, fake history, Renaissance, fake history. We know that because that's when they whitewashed everything. Palladian, fake history, Richardsonian, Romanesque, fake history, Chicago School or Victorian, fake history. So I'm going down to the bottom. After the great purge, of the Tartarians, the religious order spearheaded by the Romanovs reconstituted these amazing structures into Presbyterian, Catholic, and Anglican Mormon synagogue, mosque, temples, etc. And although we read our books that the Mormon religion held, we're not Mormons. And although we read out of the book called the Bible that the Christians hold, we're not Christian. We're Israelites, the people of the promise, the covenant people of the Most High God, the highest. Now I'm going to start back off on page 30. We just found out that all those things that are false history, just to let you know what the author called false history. So when you start talking about those things that he just calls false history, it makes me to wonder, why did he continue on that path of talking about these things he said was false history? So I'm going to continue. Page 30. North America Moors, elimination and rewriting of American history. Credit to Marcia Ramalho at the Blue on Facebook. The territories of Canada, United States, and Mexico were known as India Superior. We told you about, I read up to you in the second video of how these Negroes who was termed to be Mexicans, just using information as has been told to us through the books, who owned all of these lands that the white race, as they put it, took from them. The territories of Canada, United States, and Mexico were known as India Superior and were populated by the same people that was wiped out across the ocean during the Russian Revolution, 1917. And like I said, I'm going to try to read a little slower than usual because they have a lot of long words and big words in this book. So I won't have to, I still may struggle with some, but I'm going to at least try to take my time to read it a little slower so I can not mess them up so much. And German Revolution of 1918 to 1919. The Russian Revolution alone may have exterminated a 5-decade-long bloodbath that slaughtered 1 million Russian Tartarians. As the old world order Tartarians were eliminated, the new world order Romanovs then divided the imperial territory as Canadian, American, and Mexican lands, seized the world power, and rewrote history of Americas. So the second video, we talked about how the difference of the people. The books of remembrance tells us that the old world, or the time of Adam and on forward, that both the wicked and the righteous were dark-skinned, a very dark-skinned people. Which leads people to, and based on their works, he said you should know them by their works, for people to write books like this. Where did these people come from? If everybody began dark-skinned. This is a question to ask. Because I know a lot of us think about it. Even a lot of them think about it when they read and find the true history. And the ancient people were always termed Aboriginal, indigenous. The modern people, as recorded in 1828 dictionary, under American, they're known as the quote-unquote white people. Even Israel itself, the ancient people being the dark-skinned, complected people. The modern people, quote-unquote white people. That's all throughout all writings. That's how you separate the people. The ancient to the modern. It's even doing it right here. Talking about these modern people took the stuff of the ancient people. He said the territories of Canada, United States, and Mexico were known as India Superior and were populated by the same people that was wiped out across the ocean during the Russian Revolution, 1917, and German Revolution of 1918 to 1919. The Russian Revolution alone may have exterminated a 5-decade-long bloodbath that slaughtered 1 million Russian Tartarians. According to this book, the Tartarians is another name for, as they say, Moors, who they say is false history. And it's going to tell you who these Moors are when we get there. As the old world order Tartarians were eliminated, in the new world order, Romanos then divided the imperial territory as Canadian, American, and Mexican lands, seized the world power, and rewrote the history of the Americas. After taking possession of the new founded in Nova Scotia, the NWO agents reached New Amsterdam, actually New York, Washington, and the Great Lakes of North America, settling in the Milwaukee, Chicago, and Detroit. From there, they organized the massacre of tens of millions of buffaloes, cows, and wild horses and transformed the assembly line of the electric car factories into oil cars. Man, I'm just trying to tell you, why did these people always do so much destruction and organization of massacring? And man, that's why I'm interested to read about this book. Because righteous people just don't do that type of stuff. People, I mean, I'm not even, you don't have to be religious. You don't are nothing like that. But just decent people don't always sit around thinking about destroying and massacring and conquering. What kind of human being, if they are human, sits around thinking about things like that, plotting and scheming, and round tabling? You should know them by their fruit. As the old world order Tartarians were eliminated, the new world order Romanos then divided the imperial territory as Canadian, American, and Mexican land, seized the world power, and rewrote the history of Americas. After take possession of Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, the NWO agents reached New Amsterdam, actually New York, Washington, and the Great Lakes of North America, settling in Milwaukee, Chicago, and Detroit. From there, they organized the massacre of tens of millions of buffaloes, cows, and wild horses, and transformed the assembly lines of the electric car factories into oil cars. It was necessary, swept away all the fertile lands from its original inhabitants. It was then the massacre of men and animals began. Man, they got to grieve the Most High, man. The NWO ordered the native Indians. Remember, Christopher Columbus was such a great navigator that he thought he landed in India, hence American Indians were named. Got to give you a review. All right. I'm reading something else to you, too. I'm just going to read the epilogue out of this book in the back page. Told y'all to read this book to you, too. And I will, because it's not a big book. Most I say the same. Just using sections out of it, but I'm going to read the totality of it one day. Most High give me the go ahead to read it. Page 54, Revealing America's Dark-Skinned Past, Red Silver Fox Thunderbird, epilogue. It is imperative to comprehend that up until recent times, the history of the United States and America has been related to the public through European eyes, modern European eyes. European standards and European point of view. And as we reread these stories, we must use caution, as these stories depict the changing attitudes of a people of a darker complexion and not necessarily an accurate depiction of the actual events. We must comprehend that the changing attitude was a result of the greed of the Europeans and their desire for wealth and to gain and control the newly discovered lands, and their need of a servile population that would help to accomplish those goals. It is equally impressive to comprehend that this servile population, while being categorized as Negro, were not necessary and in many cases did not arrive here on slave ships from Africa. The brown indigenous people of the Americas were not only the first slaves used here, but were also the first victims of what became the Transatlantic slave trade. Lastly, it is imperative to comprehend that the tens of millions of Native Americans who disappeared after 1492 did not all die in the Holocaust, afflicted in the Americas. So they say this is the true Holocaust. Many thousands were sent to Europe and Africa, where their descendants still live. See, he's telling the true story, the same one that the sealed portion tells us. We didn't come from Africa, we were sent to Africa. And a lot of the true Africans were the Afrikaans that came from Africa, which were the quote unquote white man. But more than that, those that disappeared did not disappear at all. They got absorbed into the slave population, got reclassified as African. And many of the descendants of those people are living today as African Americans. Read this part to you. See, a lot of you, I'm just reading you information, and it's obviously true because you can see for yourself, but you'll still try to say somebody is, that's racist, which is laughable because we're not the ones that's doing all this violence and doing all of these round table meetings to depopulate people. We don't do those type of things. Plus, I'm reading it from books. One of the most prevalent fallacies in North America history is the story surrounding Christopher Columbus and the people he encountered. It is interesting to note that early 20th century histories, that's when stuff was rewritten a lot of times, during those times and before, 1600s, 1400s on up, 1492. It is interesting to note that the early 20th century histories were stating that Christopher Columbus was trying to prove that the world was round. See, that's not true. However, late 19th century historical writings on Columbus, not school textbooks, make no mention of this revelation. They do, however, tell in great detail of the carnage that took place on the islands during Columbus' reign. So we're going to read that Columbus was also known as a Moor. They also describe in detail of the hospitableness of the indigenous people, the gentle nature of the indigenous people until they had to defend themselves, and that the indigenous people were considered Negroes. Back to the One World Totalitarian, page 30. After take possession of the Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, the NWA agents reached New Amsterdam, actually New York, Washington, and the Great Lakes of North America, settling in Milwaukee, Chicago, and Detroit. From there, they organized the massacre of tens of millions of buffaloes, cows, and wild horses, and transformed the assembly line of the electric car factories into oil cars. It was necessary, swept away all the fertile lands from its original inhabitants. It was then that the massacre of men and animals began. The NWO ordered the native Indians. Remember, Christopher Columbus was such a great navigator that he thought he landed in India, hence American Indians were named. To leave their lands and march without water or food for days, we know as the Trail of Tears. The aim was to exterminate them without spending ammunition. Others were killed on their own land through blankets impregnated with smallpox. Man, what kind of people would do these type of things? To people that are peaceful. Meaning you no harm at all, but you bringing death and destruction and all manner of evil. What does it say the devil does? The devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy. I'm just using references where it fits. Perhaps many of them went to feed Chicago's meat industries mixed with those of their herds, according to the Harwap Lukkipa essay in Tartaria Info. Approximately 50,000 people worked in the slaughterhouses and about 12,000 animals were slaughtered per hour. By this time, all factories, industries, and properties had already changed hands and would slowly be brought together into future corporations. Sugar, beer, cotton, alcohol, corn, weapons, banks, paper money, oil companies, casinos, financial services, vehicles, railways, corporate facilities, health system, airplanes, grocery stores, education and research, cement, copper, steel, tourism, information technology, energy, gold, diamonds, bomber planes. In the South, where there had never been segregation, slaves, or black subordination, before the carnage was equally total, what the official history reports as a reconciliation between the North and the South after the Civil War never existed. The massacre was necessary so that the NWO could take over all the lands and retell the history, concealing the destruction and remitting it to a remote past. Legends like Mark Twain then would emerge, signing novels that would describe a racism non-existent through the eyes of Tom Sawyer and beautiful real balloon rides in the adventures of Huckleberry Finn. The original American Moors were likely Islamic. Islam was in America and had a big influence on America. because you have a total of 565 names, 484 in America and 81 in Canada, of villages, towns, cities, mountains, lakes, rivers, and Electra, etc., and etc., are etymologically Arabic. Go back to page 1. The fake history has been called the ancient architectures as Moorish revival or Morisque and Islamic, and also colonial, medieval, neoclassical, Baroque, Romanesque, Gothic, Boix arts, electric, Tudor, Renaissance, Palladian, Richardsonian, Romanesque, Chicago School, or Victorian. The fake history. Which were designed back to page 30, bottom of the page, which were designed by locals long before the arrivals of Columbus. Many of these names are in fact the same as names of Islamic places. Mecca in Indiana, Medina in Idaho, Medina in New York, Medina and Hazen in North Dakota, Medina in Ohio, Medina in Tennessee, Medina in Texas, Medina in Arva in Ontario, Mohammed in Illinois, and Mona in Utah are just a few noticeable names at the outset. A closer analysis of the names of native tribes would immediately reveal their Arabic etymological ancestry. Anazizi, Ananasi, Apache, Arawak, Araucana, Chavin, Cherokee, Cree, Hohokam, Hoopa, Hopi, Maka, Mohican, Mohawk, Nazca, Zulu, and Zuni are only a few. Islam was everywhere in the Americas. One just has to look for it, because you can see the evidence from Queen Khalifa, California, to Alabama, to Tallahassee, to Medina, Ohio, to Moorestown, New Jersey, to Islamorada, Florida, and to Alhambra, California. So yes, Muslims have left a big impact on America. What happened to the Berbers, Saracen Muslims of the Americas? Well, have you ever heard of the Spanish Inquisition via the Dum Diverses of 1452, issued by the Pope or their Pope, authorizing Christians to enslave Saracens and non-believers and to take their lands because no one disappeared? It's just that everyone has become ignorant. There are over 500 cities and towns in the United States named after Muslims in the huge part of Europe as well. The textbooks, history, his story, and education of today are all manipulated. Therefore, Western academics will not get us out of our deep sleep, because Western academics is the institution that has put we, the people, Lene Lenape, M-U-U-R-S, Moors, Washita. Lenape Moors, Washita, to sleep. Did a little research. So the Washita So the Washita come out of the Chata. So Chata is the original name, then later it's created to become Choctaw. He said, Western academics will not get us out of our deep sleep because Western academics is the institution that has put we the people, Lenape Moors, Washita, to sleep. To begin with, we need our institutions and scholars that are not compromised by oaths and by Western academics. The Moor, M-O-O-R, comes from the Orient, the Far East. What's also interesting is that the Oriental means Western scholar who studies Islam, according to the book. Orientalism by Edward Said. Islam came from the Orient. Additionally, if you read subsection 4 of this Delaware law, it will tell you that the Lenape Indians were formerly known as M-O-O-Rs. The Lenape were Delaware M-U-U-Rs / M-O-O-Rs originally. However, the word Lenape means we, the people. The preamble of the U.S. Constitution are true people. Lenape also means serpent, dragon, naga, nigga. Likewise, Indian names like Sioux and Dakota also mean serpent or dragon because of the M-U-U-Rs. Indians named themselves after the serpent wisdom that they worshipped when M-U-U-Rs ruled the world. But where does Islam come from? Did it come from Mecca, California, Medina, Indiana, Mecca, Indiana, or Morocco, Indiana? Did it come from Sufism or Sophia, which was a science that came from India? Do all religions come from India superior in the Americas? Now, in the eyes of the hijack Hebrews, Templars, aka the Holy Roman Empire, the Habsburg dynasty, the Holy Land was in possession of infidels, aka Muslims, M-U-U-Rs. Therefore, they were authorized via the Dum Verses of 1452 to take Muslim Jerusalem, the Americas Granda, away from the M-U-U-Rs who were Saracens. Also read the Dum Verses which authorized the Templars, Knights of Christ, to conquer Saracens and pagans, take their possessions, and to subject them to perpetual servitude, slavery. This papal bull, and none of them were ever rescinded. Read part 2, I talked about that. When you listen to part 2 of this video, I talked about that. which is the current problem that MUURs in the Americas face as Saracens, whom are the red ones, aka the lost tribe of Israel. Then I touched on the fact that's okay if you're saying that we're MUURs. And the MOORs were classified by the Romans because of their dark skin. But the true MUURs in the Americas are aka the lost tribe of the house of Israel. And I also reference how if you're using the name of God without using the truth of God, that's blasphemy. So if you're not going to call us what we are, the lost sheep of the house of Israel, that tells us right there why Christ in his day knew this was going to happen. And he told him and his disciples, go not except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel and tell them the truth. For that's why I came. The Father sent me just for that purpose. So I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with the MUURs. And once I used to say the same about myself. I'm not putting them down. There's a more excellent name. And they just told you themselves that the MUURs in the Americas are really the lost tribe of Israel, the Indians, and all these names that the Most High said they would call us. This papal bull was issued against the MUURs. So they're separating the MUURs from the MOORs. Because the MOORs were named by the Romans. This papal bull was issued against the MUURs as Saracens in order to take our Muslim Jerusalem away from us. Which was Granada. Now I got to go back to page 1. Because maybe that's why they keep on, because this author may be Muslim. Why am I coming to that conclusion? Based on what they told us false history was. The fake history has been called the ancient architectures as Moorish revival or Morisque and Islamic. But yet they're saying but then you keep on using the name of God and the books of God, but then you go back to Moorish. And you said that's fake history. I'm only reasoning. Notice on the 1597 map of Granada Nova, you will see the famed 7 cities of Cibola, aka the 7 cities of gold. Which if you listen on YouTube, the Drop Nation talks about that a lot. drawing a lake on the said map. Granada has the same name as the pomegranate in Spanish. The Spanish word for the fruit is granada, and therefore the symbol of the promised land, because of the pomegranate appears throughout the streets of Granada in Spain. And as you wander around the city, the pomegranate is also associated with the promised land of Israel because of pomegranate is a metaphor for the richness of the promised land of Israel. Deuteronomy 8:8. In the Song of Solomon, Sulamith's cheeks are compared to halves of pomegranate. Then it gives reference to Cant, chapter 4, verse 3. Why were all the corn places destroyed except for the first corn place in South Dakota? Dragon, serpent, which still exists. Well, because the buildings did not fit in with the current narrative of the Americans being an uncivilized new world. So most of the old world, pre-mud flood, buildings were either destroyed or converted into federal buildings, courthouses, governor's mansions, capitol buildings, post offices, state buildings, universities, and etc. Freemasonry also means the masonry that was free, because all Europeans had to do was dig out of these Moorish Tartarian structures from the mud after the great comet of 1811 to 1812 had completely destroyed the old world order via massive earthquakes, massive tidal waves, massive volcano eruptions, a great mud flood, etc., and etc. The Cherokee were the real Romans. And they built all the Greco-Roman architecture. And the Cherokee Gothic architecture in the Americas. Then I gave reference based on another book. Let me see if I can find that book for you. I believe it was this book here. Try to find it for you. I highlighted some errors, so it should help me find it. Okay, this is called, this is Probable Nationality. From the book, The 10 Tribes of Israel, are the true history of the North American Indians, showing that they are the descendants of these 10 tribes, which the One World Tartarian just confirmed itself. Scholar Select by Timothy R. Jenkins. So we're going to start here, page 267, Probable Nationality. At the bottom it reads, I'm not aware of any evidence that the Cherokees were mound builders. We just found out that the Cherokees were builders of the Roman the Greco-Roman architecture, and that the Cherokees were the real Romans. Now, going back to this book here, the 10 tribes of Israel are the true history of the North American Indians, showing that they are the descendants of these 10 tribes. And we found out that the Choctaw actually predates the Cherokee as the original people. See, these Cherokee, according to this information in World War Tertarian, they built the Cherokees built the Greco-Roman architecture and the Cherokee Gothic architectures in the Americas. But we're going to find out what the Choctaw built. Page 267 at the bottom, it says, and I'm not aware of any evidence that the Cherokees were mound builders, but they appreciated the conveniences of such structures. Page 268. And in one of their villages, William Bartram found their council house situated on a large mound, and he adds, but it may be proper to observe that this mount on which the rotunda stands is a much ancienter date than the building. So it's giving us reference to that the Choctaw was actually building from the land or from the continent, in which the Cherokee built on top of that. But it is proper to observe that this mount on which the rotunda stands is a much ancienter date than the building, and perhaps was raised for another purpose. Lieutenant Timberlake is about our best early authority on the Cherokees, and I believe he nowhere mentioned that they built upon mounds of artificial construction. Adair, however, states that they were accustomed to heap up and add to piles of loose stones in memory of departed chief or as monuments of an important event. The tribe who inhabited what we call the Gulf states, embracing the region between the eastern border of Texas and the Atlantic Ocean south of the Savannah River, belonged with few and small exceptions to the great Choctaw Muskogee family. This is also you mentioned the Washita. Embracing the tribes known as the Choctaws, the Chickasaws, the Muskegees, and the Creeks, Seminoles, Alabamans, Natchez, and others. The languages of all these have numerous and unmistakable affinities. The Choctaw or the Chata, presenting probably the most archaic form, it is among them, if anywhere within our limits, that we must look for the descendants of the mysterious mound builders. The other tribes can approach them and claim for this distinction. Their own traditions, it is true, do not point to a migration from the north, but from the west. Nor do they contain any reference to the construction of the great works in question. But these people do seem to have been a building race and to have reared tumuli, not contemptible in comparison even with the mightiest of the Ohio Valley. Page 270, probable nationality. One thing I think is certain, that until he crossed the Mississippi, he at no time was outside the limits of the widespread Choctaw Muskogee tribes, the proper name preserved, and the courses and distance between both confirm this opinion. We find them, therefore, in its time accustomed to erect lofty mounds, terraces, and platforms, and to protect their villages by extensive circumvallations. I shall proceed to inquire whether such statements are supported by late writers. Page 240, I'm just flipping to highlights what I went out through the book. It said, by us, entitled The Ancestry of the American Indians. The initials used answer very well to the name of Brother W.C. Somers. We confess that we had entirely overlooked the brother's article. He takes exception to some evidence given by us in favor of the opinion that the American Indians are of Jewish origin, Israelite origin, and offers in refutation in an inscription found in the breast of the Indian skeleton near West Liberty, West Virginia. The inscription, as he tells us, was in English and read as follows: Tremendo, thou didst die for me and my wife, Gerald, and son Pedro, 1586, William Welch. Page 164 to 165, from the bottom to the top. If any are sick at home or unable, this is called their public worship. If any are at home or sick, or if any are sick at home or unable to come out, they are allowed one of the old consecrated conch shells full of their sanctifying bitter casina, carried to them by a beloved old man. This is something like the second Passover of the Jews. At the conclusion, the beloved man orders one of his religious waiters to proclaim to all the people that the sacred annual solemnity is now ended and every kind of evil averted from the beloved people according to the old straight beloved speech. They are then commanded to paint themselves and go along with him according to ancient custom. They immediately fly about grapple up in a kind of chocolatey clay to paint themselves white. They soon appear all over, as whites as the clay can make. Then they follow in an orderly procession to purify themselves in running water. The beloved man, a high priest, heads the holy train, his waiters next. The beloved men according to their seniority, and the warriors according to their reputed merit. The women follow in the same orderly manner, with all the children who can walk, arranged according to their height. The very little ones are carried in their mother's arms. In this way, in this manner, they move along, singing Hallelujah to Wayo, Hiwa, Yehovah, Yohiwa, singing Hallelujah to Yehoiah, till they get to the water, when the high priest jumps into it, and all the train follow him, having thus purified themselves and washed away their sins, and they suppose and verily believe that they consider themselves as out of the reach of the temporal evil for their past vicious conduct. They now return to the center of the holy ground, where, having made a few circles danced around the altar, they finish their annual great festival, depart in joy and peace. page 158, their public worship. Though the Indians in general believe the upper heavens are inhabited by Ishtohula Abba, and a great multitude of the inferior good spirits, yet they are firmly persuaded that the divine omnipresent spirit of fire and light resides also on earth in their annual sacred fire while it is unpolluted, and that he kindly accepts their lawful offerings in their own conduct is agreeable to the old divine law which delivered to their forefathers. The former notion of the deity is agreeable to those natural images which the divine penmen through all the prophetic writings have drawn of Yohiwa, Elohim, Yohiwa, Yohiwa, Elohim. When God was pleased with Aaron's offerings, the holy fire descended and consumed the burnt offering on the altar. Back to 272, probable nationality. It said, passing to the tribes near the Mississippi, most of them of Choctaw affiliation, we find considerably testimony in the French writers to their use of mounds. Thus, M. de la Harpe says, the cabins of the Yasos, Kyrios, Alfagula, and Aspi are dispersed over the country on mounds of the earth made with their own hands. The Natchez were mostly of Choctaw lineage. Page 273. I have not included in any of the above survey the important Dakota stock, who once occupied an extended territory on the upper Mississippi, and its influence and scattered clans of whom were resident on the Atlantic coast of Virginia and Carolina. But in fact, I have nowhere found that they were erected earthworks of any pretensions whatsoever. From what I've collected, therefore, it would appear that the only resident Indians at the time of the discovery who showed any evidence of mound building comparable to that found in Ohio Valley were the Choctaw Muskegees. I believe that the evidence is sufficient to justify us in accepting this race as the constructors of all those extensive mounds, terraces, platforms, artificial lakes, and circumvallations which are scattered over the Gulf states, Georgia and Florida. Distinctly state that such were used and constructed by these nations in the 16th century and probably had been for many generations. Such, too, is the opinion arrived at by Colonel C.C. Jones, than who no one is more competent to speak with authority on this point. Referring to the earthworks he found in Georgia, he writes, we do not concur in the opinion so often expressed that the mound builders were a race distinct from the superior in art. I'm going to read it again. We do not concur in the opinion so often expressed that the mound builders were as a race distinct from and superior in art, government, and religion to the southern Indians of the 15th and 16th centuries. It is a Baconian rule which holds good in every department of science that the simplest explanation of a given fact or a series of facts should always be accepted. Therefore, if we can point out a well-known race of Indians who at the time of discovery raised mounds and other earthworks, not wholly dissimilar in character and not much inferior in size to those in the Ohio Valley, and who resided not far away from that region and directly in the line which the mound builders are believed by all to have followed in their immigration, then this rule constrains us to accept for the present this race as the most probable descendants of the mound tribes, and seeks no further for Toltecs, Asiatics, or Brazilians. All these conditions are filled by the Chata tribes. It is true, as I've already said, that the traditions of their own origin do not point to the north, but rather to the west or northwest. But in one of these traditions, it is noticeable that they claim their origin to have been from a large artificial mound, the celebrated Nenawaya, the sloping hill, an immense pile in the valley of Big Black River. Plus, and it may be that this village reminisces of their remote migration from their majestic works in the north. The size of the southern mounds is often worthy of the descendants of those who raised the vast piles in the North Valleys. Thus, one in the Etowah Valley, Georgia, has a cubical capacity of 1 million cubic feet. The Mauser Mound near the Chattahoochee River contains about 700,000 cubic feet. You see, there's apparently, therefore, no such great difference between the earth structures of the Chata tribes and those left us by the more northern mound builders, that we need suppose for the latter any material superiority in culture over the former when first they became known as the whites. Nor is there any probability in assuming that the mound builders of the Ohio were in fact the progenitor of the Chata tribes and were driven south probably about 300 or 400 years before the discovery. In the course of it, I have said nothing about the conditions of the art of the mound builders compared to that which is the early Southern Indians, nor have I spoken of their supposed peculiar religious beliefs, which a recent writer thinks to point to Toltec connection. Nor have I discussed that comparative chronology of the mound builders upon which some very remarkable hypotheses have been erected. Nor do I think that it is worthwhile to do so. For in the present state of anthropological science, all the facts of these kinds relating to the mound builders which we have as yet learned can have no appropriate weight to the investigator. All right. Page 32, One World to Terry. The Cherokee were the real Romans, and they built all the Greco-Roman architecture and the Cherokee Gothic architecture in the Americas. This map of 1810 shows New and Old California and the vast lands of Louisiana Purchase allegory. And I caught that part where that book said the whites, but there's no need to even question that no more because we know that all these tribes were so-called Negro. It's just something about an author. Even if the author is Negro, he still got to comply with the Freemasons. So, that they big one family, one big family. So they black and white. That's why this man, I'm just saying, considering, he already done gave you, but he also said maybe he wants you to figure it out for yourself. He already given you that what is the false history, but yet he's still talking about it as if true. And then he tells you that these MUURs really are the lost tribe of Israel. But then he continues on with the Moorish outline, which he said was false history. Most High said that my words are true and every man's a liar. So based on that concept and then precepts, I choose the Most High's words. All right. So we're on page 33. Maybe. You got it for me? All right. It says today we see that the NWO taking down all Confederate flags allegedly created from the Civil War days. The Confederate battle flag was just the World Federation flag of our previous civilization, and until today is the emblem of the present Russian Navy.
How much did you need on it?
How much you put on it?
30.
All right.
I think I added more because I forgot how much you said.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. How much did you say you needed?
Really didn't need nothing but 20 or 30.
Okay. That's 30.
Excuse me. Cranberry juice. It says the Confederate battle flag was just the World Federation flag of our previous civilization until today is the emblem of the present Russian Navy. The Novorossiya flag, the color of the actual Russian Federation flag, and the state symbols of many other countries, including the flag of a false empire manufactured on an island called United Kingdom that stole us everything, including the world history. The Russian Imperial Naval Forces fought in the American Civil War in as much as they were the major naval force designed to defend all the imperial lands from the parasitic invaders coming from the north. Unfortunately, the Russian Confederate Army were defeated and lost everything. All the people, lands, properties. The NWO became victorious using superior energy weapons to cowardly kill the civilian population who slept unawares and to annihilate the star fortresses who defended our coastal cities and islands. That's how they dominated the entire Russian continent, turning some imperial cities of the Russian Confederation to dust, others into caricatures called universal exhibitions. In Antarctica, we still can find many geographical points called Russia or Ross, like the Ross Sea, Ross Dependency, Ross Embayment, Ross Ice Shelf, Ross Island, all traces of a possible missing land called Hyperborea. In Northern California, we have Fort Ross. Fort Ross is a former Russian outpost in Sonoma County, California, where 19th century Russians settled on native Cassia-Poma territory. It was established as a California state park in 1909 to protect its unique Russian character, and it is one of the earliest California state parks. Today, the park has cultural and historical significance for many groups, including the first people, Cassia Russians and Russian Americans, Alaska natives, and ranch-era settlers. The NWO would rewrite history, inventing that it had been just a struggle between whites and blacks, although they were thus creating the first roots of racism that they would nurture to launch future racial wars, fostered in the 1960s and again now through Antifa, BLM, Black Lives Matter, and Black Panthers. In reality, the leaders of the Northern NWO of the so-called Union Army were the first to segregate around 180,000 black soldiers in the regiment headed only by white men. The soldiers would have been recruited among African tribes, as this Africa was the first continent to be conquered by the NWO. It was from there that the parasites stole trillions in gold and diamonds after exterminating all the settler entrepreneurs in what historians call the Boers Wars. In the NWO Union Army, blacks could not reach any leadership position and were sent to their deaths without any qualms. It is well known that the parasites never fought or stepped on a battlefield. They always sent others to die in their wars. These mercenary armies would participate also in the bloody Russian Revolution, fighting the Civil War that followed 1918 to 1920. The army of mercenaries were used in the irregular warfare, and it passed to history as the Hesse soldiers. It was in this dynasty that those who belonged to the elite of parasite agents would hide many names. Furthermore, Northwest U.S. territory. I can see Russia from my house. Presidential candidate Sarah Palin. Furthermore, we can see a direct lineage of Russian Orthodox churches built from Alaska down through California, again dating back to the mid-18th century, along with accompanying railway lines that was already delivered mail in 1860, all the way to Washington. Alaska and Russia are only 58 miles apart at their closest point, and no fortresses or defenses are in place today, where invasions of the U.S. would seem the most likely. In 1784, with the encouragement from Empress Catherine the Great, explorer Grigory Shekho found Russia's first permanent settlement in Alaska at Urine the Great. Explorer Grigory Shekho founded Russia's first permanent settlement in Alaska at Three Saints Bay 10 years later. The first group of Orthodox Christian missionaries began to arrive, evangelizing thousands of Native Americans, many of those descendants, to maintain the region. Captain Sterling Romanov and his wife Anna Romanov found the first colony in the Americas. They founded the first Russian colony. Captain Sterling Romanov and his wife Anna Romanov they founded the first Russian colony in the Americas. Between 1774 and 1800, Spain also led several expeditions to Alaska in order to assert its claim over the Pacific Northwest. These claims were later abandoned at the turn of the 19th century. This is Count Nikolai Rumyantsev funded Russia's first naval circumnavigation under the joint command of Adam John von Krusenstern and Nikolai Rezanov in 1803 to 1806, and was instrumental in the outfitting of the voyage of the Rurik's circumnavigation of 1814 to 1816, which provided substantial scientific information on substantial scientific information on Alaska's and California flora and fauna, and important ethnographic information on Alaskan and Californian, among other natives. In 1920, 100-pound bronze church bell was unearthed in Orange Grove near Mission San Fernando Rey de Espana in San Fernando Valley of Southern California. It has an inscription in the Russian language which said, in the year of 1796, in the month of January, this bell was cast on the island of Kodiak by the blessing of Juvenali of Alaska during the sojourn of Alexander Androvich Baranov. Now, this Russian Orthodox Kodiak Church artifact from Kodiak Island in Alaska arrived at a Roman Catholic mission church in Southern California remains unknown. Page 35, the Russian Orthodox churches from Washington State to California. The Russian Orthodox Church in Oregon traces its history back to the Russian Orthodox mission to Alaska, which was established in the 1790s to serve both Russian traders and newly converted Alaskan natives, after Russia sold Alaska to the United States in 1867. The Russian Orthodox Church in North America continued to grow, serving multi-ethnic immigrant communities of the Orthodox faith that kept arriving from Eastern Europe, Russia, and the Middle East. In the late 19th century, several different groups of Orthodox immigrants arrived in Oregon. And while their backgrounds varied, they were similar in that they were overwhelmingly poor, illiterate, unskilled, or semi-skilled peasants without the means to build their own church. We're going to go on down. We're going to move on to page 73 of the book of the One World Tartarians. And it starts off, the first natives of America, Black Moors, Moors. In case you're just coming in, got to read the introduction to you so you can see what he calls fake history. So the fake history has been called the ancient, this is page 1, the same book. The fake history has been called the ancient architecture as Moorish revival or Morisque in Islamic, and also colonial, medieval, neoclassical, Baroque, Romanesque, Gothic, Boix Arcs, Eclectic, Tudor, Renaissance, Palladian, Richardsonian, Romanesque, Chicago School, or Victorian. Say this is the fake history. So we'll now go back to page 73, the first natives of America, Black Moors. Author, we also just read about the Moors being the Choctaw, not being the Rome, what am I talking about? The Moors being the Cherokees, who built the Roman architectures. And that the Choctaw being the Muors, Washita, all these things, and are the original mound builders. And he said these are the lost tribe of Israel. The first natives of America, Black Moors, Moors, author and historian Chancellor Williams said, the original Moors, like the original Egyptians, were Black Africans. We found out that these original Moors, if they're called the Indians or called the lost shape of the house of Israel, these are the original Indians of the Americas. But here he said these Black Moors are the original Moors, like the original Egyptians, were Black Africans. And what does let me read it for you again so you won't think I'm just saying stuff. Go to Webster's Dictionary. Excuse me. Webster, 1828 dictionary. Moor, noun, dark, obscure. A native of the northern coast of Africa, called by the Romans. Called by the Romans from the color of the people. Mauritania, the country of dark complexioned people. The same country is now called Morocco, Tunis, Algiers, etc. And we also found out that both continents has many of the same names. But they're called by the Romans from their color of the people. the country of dark complexioned people. The first natives of America black MOORs. You say that's fake history? Author and historian Chancellor Williams said the original Moors and I told you I reserve the right to interject my thoughts. I've studied on Moors and different things. Like I told you before, I was on the pathway that, from what I had read at the time, that I was a MUUR, not a MOOR, but a MUUR, Washita Moor. But then more research, and then even just through imagery of how the ancients looked, I ran across a couple of photos. That one photo I looked at looked like my dad. And then another photo I looked at looked like my oldest daughter. And they called them Tata. And I said, man, it seemed like somebody is telling me something. Thought I was from the tribe of Judah. And then, excuse me. Then I ended up with this in my hand, reading and breaking down scriptures in the Book of Mormon, who they said was the white man's book. So it was like someone was directing my pathway and my steps down a certain path. And then I read that most people here in these Americas, who the Most High was allowed to have the first and the second stick, will be categorized as being from the house of Joseph, from either Ephraim or Manasseh. But those who have placed in the authority of having this book in our hand, teaching from it, we're going to be from the house of Ephraim. And that's not based on whether you like it or not. That's the word. And it's backed by evidence. Because I tried to give the book away at least 2 to 3 times. When those who say that they're Mormons, the guy, the quote unquote white young men who ride the bikes. But these two didn't ride bikes, they just happened to walk up from the car. And they gave me the book. They gave me a very nice one. I still kick myself today because they gave me one that probably had a whole bunch of information. I threw it away like a fool. Because I was still under the spell of Christianity. They said, you can't read no other books. But the Most High kept on making it get back in my hand. So it wasn't something that I had the choice to put down. He wouldn't let me put it down. He kept on giving it back to me. Like, no, don't take this. Then I told you about the time when This is even before anyone had the sealed portion, because they were still talking about the Book of Mormon. And I ordered the sealed portion because nobody else was talking about it. That's the most high honest truth. But Amazon wouldn't send it to me. Well, when they did try to send it to me, they said, undeliverable. They said something like that, but they didn't give it to me. And then the sealed, because they were talking. Other brothers was talking about the sealed book of Moses, what they call the sealed book of Mormon. That's what they were talking about at the time. Nobody was even talking about the sealed portion. But I ordered it because I was gonna bring it out. But Amazon wouldn't give it to me. So I just assumed it just wasn't meant for me to bring it out. But the Most High had to been from the Most High because he didn't want to put on my mind order it. It ain't just something I decided I'm gonna just order. I was trying to give away the first one, the Book of Mormon. Threw that in the trash 3 times. At least 2. All right, let's continue. Page 73. The first natives of America, Black Moors, M-O-O-Rs, author and historian Chancellor Williams said, the original Moors, like the original Egyptians, were Black Africans. We just found out that through another book that the story was told in reverse, and that these American Indians was the ones that were shipped off to other places, including Africa. And then we found out that these Moors come from Africa. So they're not the first Americans. See, as you notice right now, I love my daughter, but you know they have a such thing as gang stalking. So she don't even cuss like that. All of a sudden she's cussing. You hear it in the background. So she's sent on her mission from them. Been doing a lot of what do they call it? What they do. But what am I to do? That's my daughter. But what I did pray, I'm gonna be honest with you, I prayed. I said, Father, if she cannot be saved and she's not one of yours, I'm gonna leave it in your hands. You cause her to leave. I'm not gonna put her out though. See, she always comes home at the right time when I'm making a video. You notice that a lot, right? Gaslighting. I think that's what they call it. You know. But we love our children. So I think my other children, for the most part, except for by obligation, they don't want to harm their dad, so they only come when they have to. But she probably more with it. But, you know, we serve the Most High, these true Israelites, so we leave stuff in his hands. But while she's here, I still tell her the truth. So let's get back to it. The Tartarian Culture, page 73, chapter 4. The first natives of America, Black Moors, the author and historian Chancellor Williams said, the original Moors, like the original Egyptians, were Black Africans. The 16th century English playwright William Shakespeare used the word Moor as a synonym for African. Now, us who know the truth now, even in stuff that is false history, still tells us why people stick to this story. Because they want to get us away from our land and make us think that we came from Africa. But we know better now. The 16th century English playwright William Shakespeare used the word Moor as a synonym for African. And as I did more research, because I watch a lot of African movies, they're entertaining. But even as I looked at the term African, most of these people, who some of are truly our brothers, they don't even call themselves African. They call themselves whatever individual race they're from. Most of them don't say they're Africans. They say whatever race they're from. For you men who are, it's nothing wrong with looking at beautiful women. So if you're a man, go pull up the most beautiful women of Africa and watch. They're going to pull up different people that they call African. They don't say they're African. They might say Ethiopian or whatever else. They only pull that African stuff off on us. Go back to Africa. We're at in Africa. Just like they pull the African American stuff on us. So what is it? Africa or America? Which one? And then, like we read the true term of what American is. That's not hateful. That's just knowledge. Let me see something. Let me read something to you. The Diversa Africa. A Diversa Africa. There are over 3,000 different ethnic groups speaking more than 2,100 different languages in all of Africa. people there practice a variety of religions, including Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and traditional religions specific to their ethnic culture. So that's what I was talking about. When somebody says, you're African, they don't call themselves African. They call themselves from what culture, what race they come from. They only put that African stuff on Americans. Well, I want to go to Africa. Where are you going? And you don't fit there. You don't belong there. You didn't come from there. That's why they say, even in the movies, you cannot do business with a Kada. It says the 16th century English playwright William Shakespeare used the word Moor as a synonym for African. Let's look at the word synonym. Synonym, noun, etymology online dictionary. Word having the same sense as another. Early 15th century, but usually in plural form before 18th century. Or if singular, a synonyma, from Old French synonym. 12th century, directly from late Latin synonymum, from Greek synonymon, word having the same sense as another, now used in neuter of synonyms, having the same name as synonymous, together, same. So in other words, if you say you're Moor, you acknowledging, whether you know it or not, as being an African. That's why they push the Moor. And why did they do that? Because they were called by the Romans. That's just for your consideration, if you can understand what I'm saying. That's why the Most High said, if those who are called by my name, I will heal your land. When you're an Israelite, you are an American. From this continent, you're from the Garden of Eden. That's where the Garden of Eden is, where Adam left, where the Christopher Columbus and them knew they were coming to. And when you acknowledge that you are a Moor, a name that God didn't call you, you putting yourself on another continent. It says the 16th century English playwright William Shakespeare used the word Moor as a synonym for African. We just read what a synonym means. It says, basically he's saying they're the same thing. Moor, African, African, Moor. This contemporary Christopher Marlowe also used African and Moor interchangeably. Black soldiers, specifically identified as Moors, were actively recruited by Rome. Oh, called by the Romans for their dark skin. Moors. Black soldiers, specifically identified as Moors, were actively recruited by Rome and served in Britain, France, Switzerland, Australia, Hungary, Poland, and Romania. Saint Maurice, patron saint of medieval Europe, was only one of many black soldiers and officials under the employ of the Roman Empire. Why do they also have Moors always associated with the White House? I'm not saying if it wasn't noble back in the ancient times, but in modern times, with associating with these modern Europeans, the Moors are associated with them too, and that can't be good. Allegedly. Although generations of Spanish rulers have tried to expunge this error from the historical record, recent archaeology and scholarship now shed fresh light on the Moors, Moors, who flourished in Al-Andalus for more than 700 years, from 711 AD until 1492. The Moorish advances in mathematics, astronomy, art, architecture helped propel Europe out of the Dark Ages into the Renaissance. The Moors brought enormous learning to Spain that over centuries would percolate through the rest of Europe. The intellectual achievements of the Moors in Spain, see, they're talking about now, this is Moors, had a lasting effect. Education was universal in Moorish Spain, while in Christian Europe, 99% of the population was illiterate, and even kings could neither read nor write. At a time when Europe had only 2 universities, the Moors had 17, located in Almeria, Cordova, Granada, Jaén, Malaga, Seville, and Toledo. In the 11th and 12th centuries, public libraries in Europe were non-existent, while Moorish Spain could boast of more than 70 included one in Cordova that housed hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. Universities in Paris and Oxford were established after visits by scholars to Moorish Spain. It was this system of education taken to Europe by the Moors that seeded European Renaissance and brought the continent out of the 1,000 years of intellectual and technological gloom of the Middle Ages. Page 74, destroying the identity of the Black Moor Tartarians. The Los Angeles Times, June 4th, 1990, reported that when Napoleon visited the Sphinx in 1798, everything but the head was burned in the sand. His soldiers reputedly used the Sphinx for target practice. While the Sphinx had already suffered nose damage prior to Napoleon, the greatest destruction took place during Napoleon's occupation of Egypt, as documented by Tony Broder and testified by the collection of Sphinx portraits he has assembled on page 225 of his book, Nile Valley Contribution to Civilization. These 6 portraits, drawn over a period of 100 years from 1698 to 1798, are the only current evidence available which shows the progression of the nose destruction. Besides the Sphinx, a large percentage of Africoid Kamite statues are missing their noses, whereas European-looking figures are intact. Faces are Africoid sculptured, were also altered to appear Caucasoid by Kamite's European conquerors. A Sphinx statue on the delay in the British Museum admits that the face of the statue was reworked during the Roman occupation of Egypt. Reporting on the riddle of the racial identity of ancient Egyptians, Count C. Volney, a distinguished French scholar who visited Egypt in the late 1700s, wrote with astonishment, "When I visit the Sphinx, its appearance gave me the key to the riddle. Beholding that that the head typically Negro in all its features." He later added, "The Egyptians were true Negroes of the same type as all native-born Africans." Also, let me share something with you. Because for the most part, since my life has been changed the way it has been changed, I have been dwelling alone when my daughter came. And, I always tell her, I say, I just speak to the universe, meaning, really I'm speaking to the angels, to the high court, let them know what I'm doing. I make no agreement with the enemy at any time. Never. So I told her, I said, anytime that you bring anything into this dwelling and you say I can have it, even though I offered to pay you back for it, and you say, that's okay, well, you've offered that. And we both acknowledge that we love each other. That's why we do it for each other. No outside influences. So if any influences outside trying to put off on me what they have in their plans, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. It shall not prosper. That's the word. Because I have not made an agreement with anyone else. I have not made an agreement for harm. Even though people, and I'm not talking about my daughter, and I'm talking about those outside who would put people up to do things. She says she's not been put up to do anything, but I'm just saying, I'm talking about even if people or anyone has a plan to involve me in anything, I'm not involved in it. I have not made an agreement. So if this might offend you, but this is an adult channel. I'm not from a group or a camp, but the brother gave an illustration how some of these, and I'm not talking about my daughter in this instance. I'm talking about sometimes they'll send women to brothers or men to women to try to get you in a compromising position. And they can even use family, but not sexually, but family for other reasons. They can send them in to try to do things in this day. But the brother was talking about a female who was not his family. He saw they could send them in to try to do sexual things to man or women, depending on who you are. And he was like, well, he probably was just joking. But really, if you think about it, it's the truth. Send in a woman who will do dirty things. And he said, all I'm going to do is repent anyway. And she's going to be left with a bunch of stuff in her jaws. But really, you really think about it, the Most High knows why the woman or the man was sent to you. And I'm not saying it was right that you did something like if you were tempted in that way. But at the end of the day, if you really are sincerely tempted to the point where you can't control it and you happen to leave some in her jaws, that ain't really saying nothing against the brother. Because if he's sincere, he's going to get back on track and keep doing the work. And hopefully don't fall to that temptation again. But guess what? What did she get out of it? Probably a gift card and some stuff in her jaws. So what she going to boast on that? What you get out of it, lady? All right, let me get back to the story. It's like, I'm saying it is that I don't really watch a lot of things on Netflix. And I didn't say I don't watch Netflix. I said I don't watch a lot of things on Netflix. Because a lot of stuff on Netflix is demonic. But at least I like to have the option if I want to watch it, right? So I try to keep it up to date. So it's going to run out of date. So I had about 24 notes, what they call dollars, something like that. And she said, well, I'll just give you the rest till you get some more change or get some more dollars on you. That's all right. That was our agreement. But we already established that anything we do for each other is based on love. Because that's my daughter and I'm her dad. So anybody that try to see a lot of times what they try to do is these same NWO parasites that this book calls. They're the one running this is all relevant that I'm talking about. These are the same people behind gang stalking. Sometimes they, out of greed, they'll make a person agree with them, and sometimes out of threat, coercion. So I try to keep all those things in order in mind. So I don't try to judge them too hard. So I know some people are forced to do things. But I'm showing you this. I try to show you everything going on so in case something pop up, you already know what's going on. So I asked for like a $30 gift card, but this was say from $200 to $200. So this type of stuff they do. They always try to impose, like if I send her or anyone to the market and I ask for cranberry juice, they'll try to send 2 to 3 different type of brands, which really don't matter to me because I'm gonna drink all 3 of them. But they have an agenda behind what they're doing. And in their mind, if you drink the wrong one that they don't think you should drink, then they got some kind of plot they're gonna put against you. But like I said, no weapon gonna form against me because I already told her or whoever I send they're willing to do something for me. It's out of love. That's the agreement. So whatever they're plotting and planning, that's in their mind. So I don't have nothing to do with that. Anything I do for someone is out of love. I have no ill will. And if they do it for me, it's out of love. Especially if they say it. Anything out of that, you got to get full disclosure of your evil intent. No contract is binding unless you get full disclosure of the intent. If it's good faith or bad faith. So if you're not telling somebody of your intentional bad faith in doing something for them, it's already assumed that you're doing it in good faith. Especially if you say that both parties are doing it in good faith. That's what I mean. Anything that come outside of that good faith agreement and has to be bad faith, then that contract is void. That's why I say what I say. And the Most High Word said, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. Because I operate like that. So if you give me some potato chips and I try to offer it back to you, or if you just say that you can have it, then I'm going to eat them in good faith that you had good faith. I didn't tie myself into no agreement with you. You gave it to me. That's why I gave the example what the brother from the camp said. If you come and you don't really like the brother, but you're trying to do something evil, and you happen to leave with your jaws filled up, that's what you get. Because the brother going to get back right and going to move on and preach the word. And your feelings are going to be hurt because you left with your jaws filled up. Now, if you'd have come in good faith, maybe that never happened. So I'm just letting you know where I stand on everything. It's all in good faith. I never make a contract with the evil one or evil ones. And also, it's already a fact that anytime someone tries to get you involved in a contract that you don't know nothing about, that contract is null and void anyway because you don't have the ability to know. That's like trying to make a baby sign a contract. Baby don't know nothing about a contract or what it says. That contract is null and void. You got to get full disclosure of what your intent is. Thank you for listening to me. Now, if somebody come to you with bad faith and tell you it's in bad faith and still want you to get in an agreement with them, I don't think you would do that. All right, let me move on to the lesson. Back to page 74. When I visited the Sphinx, appearance gave me the key to the riddle, beholding that head typically Negro in all of its features. He later added, the Egyptians were true Negroes of the same type as all native-born Africans. The NWO, Romanov dynasties would hold defaced statues of past monarchs in order to erase or diminish their legacy. In these cases, the removal of the nose would be accompanied by other more extensive facial disfigurements, as well as the destruction of inscriptions and symbols of office. Page 75, chapter 4, from the top. Another huge NWO lie: the transatlantic slave trade out of Africa. So the story goes, some 12.5 million Africans were taken from their homes and forced aboard slave ships that were destined for the New World. About 10.7 million people survived the horrors of the Middle Passage between 1526 and 1866, only to end up in bondage on sugar, rice, cotton, and tobacco plantations throughout the Americas and the Caribbean. The transatlantic slave trade is the largest forced migration in history. Black people are indigenous to the Americas. Black, and I don't know how I feel about the word black, but that's just for descriptive purposes. Black Native Americans are not a result of the so-called Red Indian mixing with slaves. The so-called Red Indian comes from the mixing with the European colonists and the Asians that were in America before Columbus. The first Native Americans were Mongolian Tartarians. Melville Herskovits, a European anthropologist, was one of the originators of the out of Africa theory. Herskovits never had any historical or archaeological or anthropological proof that Black people of the Americas ever derived from West and North Africa. Consequently, Herskovits crafted the theory that Blacks arrived in America from the transatlantic slave trade, which allegedly brought in more than 10 million African slaves. According to the National Archives of Spain and Smithsonian records, there was no evidence to prove that 70,000 ships with Black Africans ever sailed to the Americas. Melville carried out the teachings of his mentor, France Boas, to make the original copper-colored races of the Americas inferior and the European presence superior. Let me stop there for a minute. See, anytime that you talk truth, you're going to have to talk color, races, different things, because that's what people are. It's for a descriptive purpose. But that's really not a problem, because people do come in brown, quote unquote. The true white man is the albino. That's the true white man. If you want to say what color of skin he has white skin. The quote unquote white man has, I don't know how some people say pink or mixed with red or whatever else, because you see his veins sometimes on his, and that's no disrespect. I'm just trying to describe him correctly. He's not a white man. But you got to do these things to describe people. But that's not the true problem. The true problem is there have been so many lies about it. So when you touch on the truth, now that's what really caused the problems. That Black people are indigenous to the Americas. Black Native Americans are not a result of the so-called Red Indian mixing with slaves. The so-called red Indian comes from the mixing. We're talking about the ones that look white. The so-called red Indian comes from the mixing with the European colonists and the Asians that were in America before Columbus. The first Native Americans were Mongolian Tartarians. Melville Herskovits, a European anthropologist, was one of the originators of the out of Africa theory. Herskovits never had any historical, archaeological, or anthropological proof that Black people of the Americas ever derived from West and North Africa. Consequently, Herskovits crafted the theory that Blacks arrived in America from transatlantic slave trade, which allegedly brought in more than 10 million African slaves, according to the National Archives of Spain and Smithsonian records. There was no evidence to prove 70,000 ships with Black Africans ever sailed to the Americas. Melville carried out the teachings of his mentor, Franz Boas, to make the original copper-colored races of the Americas inferior and the European presence superior. So that's the offense right there. Anytime you try to tell the truth, the truth gonna reverse what this plot is, then that's what's gonna cause the offense. Although you telling the truth, but as long as you stick to the out of Africa theory, which all these authors and stuff tend to do, they stay in good faith or good favor. But when you start telling the truth, then you in favor of God or the Almighty, Yahweh. Original copper color races of the Americas inferior and the European present superior. Before this time, Blacks coming from Africa through the transatlantic slave trade story never existed. As a result, Melville's work has been fragmented and used as propaganda by writers like Harold Corlander and Alex Haley, which further perpetuated the myth of the transatlantic slave trade through the hit movie Roots. Americans were Black people and they were not brought here on ships. But this book tells us, and other books like it. See, a portion tells us that, although he does say because of the initial taking of the people from America to Africa, that's why they brought some back, because it's a trade. They kept on going, it's business. Instead, they were enslaved right here on their own lands. If they were brought on ships, the number are extremely exaggerated. It was published that 15,000 to 20,000 slaves arrived in the Americas between 1540 to 1850 over a 310-year period, according to history books. Like I said, I'm just reading information to you. Do your own research. The Stewart synopsis points out a few questions that should be examined. Over the period of 300 years, is it fair to say that 60,000 slaves were transported annually to the Americas? Or has the transportation of slaves to the Americas been one big myth? The largest seagoing vessel carried 400 slaves, but not all of the ships were that large. Page 76, verse 3, or number 3. Time of passage was 3 to 4 months. That means that 200 vessels, ships per year would have to travel carrying 300 people. One ship could make 3 passengers per year. The Transatlantic slave trade database says that there were 1,100 to 1,400 voyages made over the 300-year period. If that is the case, and each ship carried 400 people, the total number would be 560,000 Africans were transported. It still does not add up. We already know that over 83% of all Americans with African ancestry have Native American blood. The Native American tribes helped slaves escape or were Americans with African ancestry already part of the Native American nations. After 20 years, the Royal Adventurer, with its 15 ships, had transported between 90,000 and 100,000 slaves. That is a long way off from 15 million to 20 million slaves who were supposed brought to the Americas. Doesn't that leave a little over 14 million to 19 million people not accounted for? What's up with that? Or was the black-brown birth rate that more accelerated than the white birth rate? The calculated median of 15 to 20 million would be 17.5 million divided by 400, the largest slave vessels. That comes out to 43,750 trips. Can you show me a record where this many trips occurred, or the number of trips calculated by the so-called experts? Figures exist of 27,000 to 35,000 voyages. The same thing happened with the Holocaust in Germany during World War II. 6 million people were supposedly killed, but there are not that many names referenced who died, totaling 6 million. In fact, the official story was reduced to the number of under 1 million people. Stewart synopsis lists these black native tribes: the Washita of Louisiana, Midwest, the Yamasee of the Southeast, the Arikos, the Cherokee Indians, the Blackfoot Indians, the Pequot and the Mohegan of Connecticut, the Black Californians, Califians. Cal in California literally means black, after the Olmecs of Mexico and the Daronite of Panama. So you see right in that column right there, you didn't see the man, why you keep on giving me a blank when I try to think of the name? Yeah, that's right. The Washita is associated with the Tata. See, the Chata was first. It says 4.25 million African slave ships to Brazil and Mexico. Story goes, over the course of 300 years from the 16th to the 19th centuries, the Brazil imported around 4 million slaves. Some 40% of the total transatlantic slave trade. The overwhelming majority came from the former Portuguese colony of Angola, located on the Atlantic coast of southern Africa. On July 9th, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, named Valango Wharf a World Heritage Site, along with Northwest England's Lake District, the walled city of Ahmedabad in India, and the sacred Japanese island of Okinoshima, which doesn't allow women on its shores. Of the new sites on the list, none has a darker past than Valango Wharf, built in 1811. The wharf functioned as South America's leading slave port. It was here that as many as 900,000 enslaved African men, women, and children were held before being sold to Brazilian slave market. Those who didn't survive the ordeal, who died during the transatlantic journey or sometime after arriving at the wharf, were buried in mass graves nearby. Mexico claims African slaves as well. Total of 186 to 766 Africans were imported into Mexico during 300 years of the Spanish slave trade. So now you know that since they said we were the Mexicans, so you know this, more than likely these are the modern people they call Mexicans. That's not the offense to those who are Mexican, but we just see a trend. The ancient people were darker skinned people, and the modern people are the quote unquote white man pretending to be the ancient people. That's just a trend. Hope you don't get offended. Mexico claims African slaves as well. A total of 186,766 Africans were imported into Mexico during the 300 years of the Spanish slave trade. Looking at the appearance of modern Mexicans, it becomes clear that the now just made up, looking at the appearance of modern Mexicans, it's page 77, it appears clear that the now just made up the number without any proof or evidence of the veracity of these claims. There is no way 186,766,000 black-skinned Mongols could be responsible for the pigmented side of the well over 1 million light and dark-skinned mestizos. The American Negro or Indian or Black Moor or Mongolian Tartarian, see how they call it, all these names they call it? The American Negro or Indian or Black Moor or Mongolian Tartarian is the oldest man on earth. The oldest chromosome on earth was found in a man from South Carolina and is unrelated to African lineages. There are more pyramids in the Americas than anywhere else. The Mayak or the Z, as in Mexico, conquered the Nile Valley, Arabia, Afghanistan, India, Vietnam, and Cambodia. The statues of Buddha are simply images of Osiris, the ruler who conquered the known world in remote epoch of human history. There are many sources the Old Testament takes place in the Americas. Mexico is the original land of the American Negro, who is the Olmec, see Altecs, the Toltec, etc. In North America, here's the Algonquin, Choctaw, Washita, Peacock, Weapano, Lenape, Aracos, etc. The Spanish and Portuguese captured and sold what they called Negro de Terro into European slave markets. It's page 78, One World Tartarians. The Dutch and the English didn't even enter into Africa until the late 1700s, yet slavery started in 1492. Columbus was a Portuguese Moor named Salvator Ferdinand Zarco. And many of the European monarchs in Europe were also Negroes who came to America as they were being pushed out of Europe by the white European Catholics. The conquistadors were sent to the West Indies to destroy the kingdoms of the blacks and reduce them to servitude and slavery. It was known as Dum Diversas, the doctrine of discovery and inquisition, and gave Catholics kingdoms the right to murder, rape, enslave, and torture all those not under the authority of the Vatican and their Pope. America is the old world, and Columbus called his first voyage the Last Crusade to conquer the Holy Lands of Mexico and Peru, which mean Heru or House of Heru or Jerusalem, which became Jerusalem. It is also known as the navel of the world. Teotihuacan means city of Tatuti or thought, and Tenochtitlan, which became Mexico City, means city of Enoch. Mexico is named for Moses or Mexi, like Moshe. The Old Testament contains volcanoes, corn, bears, and tobacco, all which are native to America. Utah is Judah and contains the city of Moab. The Great Salt Lake is the Dead Sea. There are more pyramids and megalithic structures in the Americas than anywhere else, including the Nile Valley. The NWO tells the story backwards. The Negro is the Indian or copper-colored indigenous people of the Americas, who is actually a red skin. Remember, that was obvious on the Washington Redskins helmet, and that's why they changed it. Because if you pay attention more to the game, you would see, based on the color and the emblem on the helmet, both teams was the Washington Redskins, based on the color of their skin. No matter what team the Washington Redskins played against, they was playing against the Redskins. And that was a sign that the so-called Negro was waking up, what made them change the emblem on them helmets, if you consider. Because before that, people weren't thinking about things like that. So they just continued to play the game. The Negro is the Indian or copper-colored indigenous people of the Americas, who is actually a red skin. Many think black people are black, yet there are many shades of copper, which is the color of the earth. If you look in old dictionaries, you will see that the nigger and Indian were synonymous. We got that word synonymous again. So they interchange nigger and Indian. That's basically some of the same people. And that the colored is simply short for copper color. Why do you think they keep changing our titles from Indian to Negro to colored to African American? The black Moor Negro is the most copied man on the earth. Page 79. Toltecs, Mayans, etc. all were black Moors. Most historians, anthropologists, and scholars refer to the Olmecs as the mother culture of pre-Hispanic Mexico. The presence of the Olmecs predates the Mayan civilization by more than 1,500 years, and the Aztecs in Mexico by as many as 2,500 years, which would indeed make it the oldest pre-Columbian civilized society in Mesoamerica, emerging from the jungles of Mexico's southernmost Gulf Coast. The Olmec influence spread through Central America and manifested itself in art, architecture, religious rituals, and other areas. There's enough evidence from architectural digs to support the idea that the Olmec civilization possessed several of the characteristics of a civilization: a social structure, a political structure, an economic structure, religion, and art. The Tolan of the Aztec mythology was renowned for its sumptuous palaces and awe-inspiring buildings made from gold, jade, turquoise, and quetzal feathers. The city was also thought to have been flooded with wealth generated by the gifted Toltec craftsmen, highly skilled in metallurgy and pottery. So much so that their potters were said to have taught the clay to lie. Cole 156. And later, Aztec metal workers and jewelers were even known as Tolteca. The Toltecs were also credited with mastering nature and producing huge maize crops in natural colored cotton red, yellow, green, and blue. Natural colored cotton red, yellow, green, and blue. Unsurprisingly, following centuries of looting, no artifacts survived to attest this material wealth except indications that the Toltecs did do a major trade in obsidian used for blades and arrowheads, which was mined from nearby Pachuca. The Elmic colossal heads are stone representations of human heads sculpted from large basalt boundaries. They range in height from 1.17 to 3.4 meters, 3.8 to 11.2 foot, and weigh between 6 and 50 tons. The heads are a distinctive feature of the Olmec civilization of ancient Mesoamerica. All portray mature individuals with fleshly cheeks, flattened noses, and slightly crossed eyes. Their physical characteristics correspond to a type that is still common among the inhabitants of the Tabasco and Veracruz. The backs of the monuments are often flat. The boulders were brought from the Sierra de los Tuxtlas Mountains of Veracruz, given that the extremely large slabs of stone used in their production were transported over large distances over 150 kilometers or 93 miles using horse and buggy. The monuments represented portraits of powerful individual Olmec rulers. Each of the known examples has a distinctive headdress. The heads were variously arranged in lines or groups at major Olmec centers, but the method and the logistics used to transport the stone to these sites remain unclear. They all display distinctive headgear, and one theory is that these were worn as protective helmets, maybe worn for war or to take part in a ceremonial Mesoamerican ball game. Page 80, One World Tertarian. The last of the great Mesoamerican cultures were the Aztec. They were a Nahuatl-speaking people who in the 15th and 16th century ruled a large empire in what is now central and southern Mexico. The Aztecs are so-called from the word Aztlan, white land, an allusion to their place of origin, possibly in northern Mexico. They were also called the Tenochtitlan, from a mystical ancestor, Tenoch, in the Mexica, probably from Metzalipan, Moon Lake. The mystical name for Lake Texcoco from Tenochtitlan was derived the name of their great city, Tenochtitlan. And from Mexico came the name for the city that succeeded the Aztec capital and surrounding valley. This name was applied later to the whole Mexican nation. Check out the Tortoria dome in the image to the left. The influence of the Toltec civilization in Mexico can be seen as far away as Yucatan, specifically at the site of Chichen Itza and Mayapan. In the former set of ruins, we also see Atlantean figures at the Temple of the Warriors, but they are smaller in scale compared to the ones found at Tula. Archaeologists have debated for years about whether or not the sites identified as Toltec in the faraway Yucatan were just copying Tula, where colonies of the city were conquered by it. All can agree and plainly see the strong influence coming from the Toltecs, including the smaller Atlanteans. Whether a trading empire, influential kingdom, city-state, or a cultural movement, the Toltec civilization ended with the fall of Tula to outside northern invaders sometime in the 12th century. Most of the living quarters around the ceremonial center were abandoned by 1150 AD. And there is evidence of a huge fire sweeping through the city at about this time. Mexico's second president and first and only black president, Vince Guerrero, August 10th, 1782, through 14th of February, 1831. He was a major military leader during Mexico's War for Independence, and as the president ended slavery in this nation on September 15, 1829, in office April 1829 to December 17, 1829. Dressed to the nines in the 1900s. The Tartarians were natty, dressers and harbor dashers, even outing to the beach. Even outings to the beach included suits and hats. Everyone wore hats, even children. A far cry from the sweatsuit crowd of today. All right. So what I'm going to do right there, I'm going to end it on right there, and I'm going to come with part 4, if the Most High say tomorrow or the day after sometime. We'll see. But until then, Shalom.